This tutorial will be explaining and demonstrating how to use story frameworks, menus, and different button widget classes that are included. So let's jump straight into the overview. So for this tutorial, I have a little demonstration of a use case for the menu master class that is included. So if we go up to this monitor actor and we click into act, brings up a small UI to select an item to craft. If we select an item, crafts the item, kicks us out of the menu, and it adds it to our inventory. This item can be spawned back into the world and picked up just like a regular item. We'll touch on this further in the video and explain how this is done. So let's take a look at how this all works. If we open up our content browser, we navigate over to menus, user interface, and let's open up the pause menu. So inside the pause menu, this widget consists of 3 buttons. These are button classes that are included inside Story Framework. It's sort of a master class for buttons. So these are used to navigate between and select. The menu master navigates and selects between these different classes. Or between these different buttons, sorry. So if we go over into the blueprints, we can see we have the base functionality for navigating between buttons and selecting buttons. So let's go back over to our pause menu and take a look at how this all is set up. So on construct, we are setting the button info for the load last save button. So the menu button widget includes a info text input. So this info text input is being set by the load save date. So this just simply gets the date of the last time the game was saved. So we head back over to our onConstruct. We have the set list of buttons. So think of this sort of as you setting all the button references inside of this menu. So this can take in a direct input of a menu button, or if we navigate over to our main menu, we can see here that the set list of buttons actually takes in horizontal boxes. So you can input a horizontal box from the designer panel, which can consist of multiple buttons, just so that you do not reference literally every single button inside of your widget. So let's head back over to our pause menu. Next we have initialize. So this is used to determine what the first button will be when you first press a navigation input. So you would set this to whichever button you'd want to select first when navigating. Then we have bind button events. So if we go back over to our event graph, we'll find button pressed events. So for every button inside of your widget, a custom event is correlated to it. So for example, we have continue button pressed, which will toggle the pause game, load last save, which will just simply load the last save, and then quit to menu, which will save the game and then open up the main menu level. So if we go into this bind button events, we'll see off of each menu button reference, we can bind event to custom on pressed. So this will be called every time the custom button or the menu button is either manually selected with an input or clicked on. So this would be done for every button inside of your widget. If we take a look at our main menu, we can see that this very quickly does scale. So we go into our onConstruct, bind buttons. We have all these buttons here, and then all the different setting buttons, all binded to their own events. So that covers just about the entire process of how menu masters are set up inside Story Framework. We're now going to hop onto setting up an example. So let's hop into setting up an example. In a previous video, we touched on setting up interactable actors. So I just have this monitor actor here that uses the default interaction method. So we're going to add functionality when the player interacts with this interactable actor. So let's start off with creating a new menu. So we're going to open up our content browser. We're going to go to menus, user interface. Let's create a new widget blueprint, and we're going to use the class menu master as its parent. We'll call this craft menu. So yeah, I'll quickly be setting up the cosmetic side of this user interface. So now that the base of our new craft menu has been set up, we're going to start adding some buttons. So let's search for menu button. We're going to drag this into our horizontal box, and we're going to duplicate this 3 different times. We'll call this first one wrench item button. Next one will be called book item button, and then we'll do cassette item button. Yeah, let's give this middle widget some padding. Do 10 and 10 on either side. Now that that's done, we can go into the graph. So let's start on setting up the onConstruct functionality. So we'll right click and search for set list of buttons. Connect it up to onConstruct. Let's do a make array. We'll give this 3 pins. I'm going to go back into our designer and make sure that all these buttons are variables, which they are. So we'll just drag them all into the graph and connect them up to the set buttons lists. Then we're going to right click and search for initialize. So let's initialize it. Our first button will be the wrench, as it's located all the way on the left. So we'll just copy this reference and connect this all up. So now that we've set that up, we've set all the references for all the different buttons in the widget, and we are initializing the first button for when the player navigates. Now let's set up the different events for each button. So we'll do custom event, we'll do book item pressed, and create another 2 custom events. We'll do cassette item pressed, and finally wrench item pressed. Now that we've got our custom events set up, we can start binding these events to the buttons. So let's take these 3 references and put them into a collapse graph and call this bind button events. And let's link this up into our execution chain. So for each reference, we're going to drag off and search bind event to on custom on pressed. It's very important that this is custom on pressed and not on pressed, regular, assign, or bind. So let's drag off this. We'll search make or create events, and we'll find our book item pressed. And we're going to do this 3 times for our 3 different buttons. So let's change this to our wrench. Change this event to our wrench event. Or wrench item pressed. Let's do this again. Connect this all up. Let's do this for our cassette item. We find our cassette item pressed. Perfect. Now we've set up all our bind button events. Now that we've set up the basis for this craft menu widget, let's go back into our interactable item and start setting up the functionality for opening up the widget, changing the player's input mapping, and displaying the cursor on screen. So let's start off by first creating the craft menu widget. So we'll drag out and search create widget. We'll find our craft menu, add it to the viewport. Then we're going to search for a get player controller reference. And we're going to drag out and search for show mouse cursor, so that the player controller displays our cursor on screen when we open up the menu. Next, we're going to drag out again from the player controller and search for set input mode game and UI. This is important as the inputs for navigation utilizes game input, as well as the mouse serves as UI input. So we do need to set the input mode to allow for both UI and game inputs. So in our widget focus, we're just going to drag this down a little bit and connect up our newly created craft menu widget. Let's clean this all up here while we're working. After this, we're going to drag it and search for update input mapping context. So this function is used throughout pretty much all of Story Framework's blueprints, and this changes the player's input mapping to use different inputs depending on different states they are in. So for example, if the player is inspecting an item, it'll swap over to an inspect input mapping context, which will consist of the mouse cursor's inputs, the back button, the read button. So the reason we are swapping inputs is so that we do not activate an input that is not required for the current state that the player is in. So we're going to change this new mapping context to widget menu. So this is utilized for all the menu masters. We're going to tick update interaction variable because we want the interaction manager to store this mapping context as its current mapping context, as we'll be referencing this later. Now that that's done, we can hop back into our craft menu and set up some information for these buttons, as we didn't do this before. So button text, we'll change the wrench item button to use wrench. Same thing for the book item button, we'll do book. And again for the cassette. So let's hop in and test this. If we go up to our monitor actor and interact, it brings up our menu. So now we're going to set up storing our newly created widget as a reference inside of the interaction manager. So back into our interactable actor blueprints, we're going to do a get SF interaction manager reference. And then we're going to find our interaction manager in the content browser. So blueprints, components, core, interaction manager. And we are going to simply add a new variable for menu widget references. We're going to make this the menu master, as it's a child of the menu master. And we're going to turn this into an array. So if we ever create new menus in the future, we can reuse the same variable. So let's compile and save. Let's head back over into our item. Drag off of this and search a get widget menu references. And we're going to add a new one. And then this reference will just simply be the previously created craft menu. Now that this is set up and we have an easy way to access a reference to the craft menu, we're going to find our player controller. So we're going to go core, example, character, blueprints, player controller. So inside the player controller, this is where we're going to set up input for our menu. So we're going to go into shared input. We're going to find navigate. So this is used to navigate widgets or any other UI that requires navigation. So we're going to get a reference to our interaction manager actor component from the components hierarchy and search for get widgets references, get menu widget references. We'll do a for each loop and we will drag off of this and search navigate. So this function roots from the menu master parent. So let's connect up our action value vector2d into the navigation function. We're also just going to drag off of this is not valid, as we want this functionality to happen regardless of whether or not the pause menu is open. So now we're going to simply duplicate the same code for the back button to close the widget. So we're going to connect this up here. Off of this, we're going to search back page. Then, same thing for the select, as we want to be able to select these buttons. We're going to drag off and search select hovered button. So this will select the custom hovered button. Let's compile and save. I forgot to mention this earlier in the video, but if you are following along with this tutorial, do make sure that you are connecting up all the is not valids to the for each loops for the menu widget references on the select, back, and navigate. Okay, back to the video. Now that we set up the input for selecting the back button and navigating, we can go back into our craft menu and start setting up functionality for these functions. So since we are wanting to add items to the player's inventory, we're going to do a get sf inventory manager reference. We're going to drag over this and search for add item to inventory. Pending kill can be left empty as we are not picking up any actors, so there's no actors to destroy. We can drag off of interactable data and search for make. And this is where we would make the information for each item that we are wanting to craft. So let's change the name to wrench. Object mesh will be the wrench. Then interaction methods, we're going to do a make. This will be a pickup. So we'll do a pickup. We'll do the pickup queue. Off of pickup, we'll do another make and set the item inventory icon to wrench. Change the prompt offset to say 25. And this is now essentially all the functionality for adding a wrench to our player's inventory. So we're going to duplicate this 2 more times for our other 2 items. Now that we've done that for each button, so once that's all set up, we'll right click and search for event backpage so that we can execute functionality when the backpage function is called. So off of this will be simply resetting the input mapping back to its default gameplay input mapping context. And then we will be displaying the mouse cursor again and removing this widget from the screen. So let's right click and search for get player controller. Let's do set show mouse cursor to false as we want to hide the cursor. Let's drag off this again and set input mode game only. We'll flush the input as well. Then we're going to drag off and search update input mapping context again. And we're going to search for gameplay. So gameplay is the base input mapping context that's used for when the player's moving around in the level and can interact with actors and so on. So once that's all done, then we will remove from parent, so that we'll remove this widget from the screen. Now off of each function, we're going to simply call back page, as we want this widget to close after we craft an item. Let's also play a sound to communicate to the player that an item has been crafted. So we'll search pickup item queue. Let's compile and save. So we're just going to quickly change this functionality up a little bit. We do not want the sound to play every time the widget closes. So we're going to instead put this inside of each button function or button event. So let's duplicate this over for each event, just like so. Now once that's done, the final step is to set up the directional navigation for each button. So if we go back into our designer panel, if we click on a button, in the details panel we search for navigation. This is where we'd set up the next navigatable widget. So for instance, on the wrench item, when the right navigation input is pressed, we want it to go to the book item. So we will click on this, we will choose explicit, as we want it to go to a specific widget. We'll do this for each direction. So for right, we will choose book. So for left, we're going to have it wrap back around to the other side of the horizontal box buttons. So we'll find cassette item button. And then for up and down, there is no next button for up and down. So we will just select the same button that it is, so that it just essentially selects itself. So we're going to do this for the rest of the buttons in our horizontal box. Now that that's done, let's compile and save. Let's also slightly tweak the opacity of this text. So we're going to appearance and just slightly decrease this, so it's not so obscuring. If we go back to our level and hit play, we can test this out. So we walk up to our interactable actor, we click on it, it creates our menu with our different items. Let's choose book. Plays a sound, open up our inventory, and we have our book item. So let's do a cassette. We have a cassette. Let's do a wrench. Let's do another wrench. Now we have 2 wrenches. Now we have a gamepad plugged in, so we can test this on gamepad. So if we walk up to this actor and interact, we can use our D-pad to navigate. So since we set up the wrench button as the initial button, that's the first button we'll hover over when we press a navigation input. You can see we can navigate through this and it wraps around. If we press A, which is the select hovered button input, we'll select that button and you'll see it's added to our inventory. The basis of everything has just about been covered. So that just about covers your introduction to customizing and setting up your own widgets inside Story Framework using the Menu Master widget as a parent.